Miles, everybody.
Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Love of Creatives podcast. I am your host, Dwight, joined by our other wonderful host, Maddox. And we are the Connections and Community guys. And today we're joined by our featured guest, the lovely Marissa Heyl. Hi, Marissa.
Hey guys, so nice to be here. Thank you.
I was so glad that you could join us today. I know that you've done a lot of things that are really fantastic. I know that you've had the chance to go and be a part of some incredible ventures where you got to weave in your experience as someone with a background in anthropology and neuroscience and all kinds of fun things. But you've done things that are so rich and varied that I don't think that I could do you justice in a proper introduction. How about you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, that's very kind. I've definitely been told by a Brit that I had quite a quirky background, and I think though that that's sometimes this space in between these different ways of thinking and industries is where the juicy innovation and creativity comes out. So, a little bit about me. I am currently the program manager for the Social Impact Lab at SMU, which is a fantastic new lab and opportunity for students and alumni um, who want to receive funding and mentorship in for-profit businesses that prioritize social and environmental responsibility. And I absolutely love this because it's so much of my life has been focused on looking at taking the best of philanthropy and the best of business and putting them together and really thinking about how these don't have to be mutually exclusive. And we can prioritize people, planet, and profit all together. And then I'm also a creative entrepreneur, and I think there's so much opportunity to highlight the work of artists and designers, and particularly underrepresented artists in these works. So that's been my background is in starting several ventures that really highlight the work of folks who are underrepresented and creating spaces of belonging and creating a clothing line that makes women feel empowered and beautiful, but also as a symbol of the values that they hold dear. Um, so yeah, I don't want to get into it too much because I could talk for days. But yes.
Well, it all sounds amazing. And I know that there are a lot of beautiful threads to weave together, and it's really hard to capture it in the short time that we have. But I'm just curious, what stands out as the oh, well, what would be your greatest achievement up to this point, the thing that you're most proud of personally?
Oh, that's a great question. I think from a entrepreneurial perspective, starting a business that I have a sustainable clothing line that I've had for 12 years called Symbology. And it was born out of a trip that I went on in college. So 20 years ago, now I'm back working at a university, which is so exciting to tap into that potential and that idealism that, we all have. And I got to go to India to research how women are empowered through fair trade business models. And I went to visit women in slum areas and in villages. And in some of these areas, the craft traditions, the weaving and embroidery, is actually taking place of a written history or a written language. So, textile and craft all over the world, not just in India, but in many other countries, plays such a huge role in identifying cultural heritage and recording community history. And as an anthropology student, as a journalism student, I found that really fascinating. And I watched a woman block print, which is the hand stamping technique, watched her block print a tablecloth. And that's when I had the, aha moment that that's what I want to do. I want to make that into a dress. And I want to be able to create, I mean, I always loved fashion. I just thought fashion was exploitive and superficial as an industry. And I thought that maybe I wouldn't be able to do that with my passion for social justice and human rights. But being there with those women, seeing how transformative those cooperative models were, that not just gave women an opportunity to earn an income and a sustainable income, but to also connect with other women, learn financial literacy, have healthcare programs. Really, how it's so transformative and so beautiful, and how impactful investing in those women was in impacting their communities. So they're sending their kids to school. I mean, they're reinvesting. Um, to see that firsthand and not just study that in school was really, really powerful. And it's through community, and I'm sure we'll tap into this, but it's through mentors and supporters and wonderful folks that I was able to then launch my line. But I was very scared to do so. And there were some things that happened in life that kind of pushed me in gently or not so gently, pushed me into that role of doing the thing that I had wanted to do since I first went to India. But it took a few years to get there.
Well, I would like to kind of tug on that thread about community. Tell me just a little bit about how that came about. What were those gentle nudges?
Sure. Well, 2009 recession
Yeah.
was one. I was working at an immigration and refugee agency in DC, and I loved it. I grew up going to DC with my family every year because my mom was a history and government teacher. So that was, of course, we'd go to the mall and to the museums and the monuments, and that was like very much a ingrained in my upbringing. And I think that was cool because I think that, what later kind of transpired was it really kind of goes back to this idea of civic engagement as well, but just maybe a little bit more on a global scale. And I lost my job in 2009. Recession. Oh man, I was working at the Starbucks, serving some of the people who were my colleagues a week before. And it was hella humbling for sure. Um, and I worked at an Indian restaurant in Alexandria. I mean, but I was applying to jobs, doing marketing for international NGOs, and no one was hiring. And so, yeah, so it was humbling. I desperately wanted to stay there, but I just couldn't make it work. I remember sending out, I think, like 60 resume and cover letters. And this is a little bit pre LinkedIn and, where some of these things could be expedited. And I
Yeah.
just never heard responses. And it was heartbreaking. So I moved back home with my family in North Carolina. And I so I applied to the London College of Fashion, and that's where the Brit, who I mentioned earlier, who said I had a quirky background, I was speaking with their admissions officer, and I wanted to get a degree in sustainable fashion because we didn't really have anything in 2010 in the US. Thankfully, now it's more of an established course and curriculum. And I got into the program in London. But then I also thought, I've always wanted to actually design my own clothes and start my own line. And I really figured I was like, I'm going to spend a lot of money either pursuing this graduate program, and then, I won't be able to design. That's the challenge, right? So I could, probably be in a safe place where I'll be able to get hired in some of these design firms to really focus on more sustainability, more people-centric production and supply chains, which would be great. But I'm a creative, and I knew that I wanted to and I needed to design the textiles and the clothing, which is something I wanted to do since I was really little. And I took the leap of faith to start my own line. And it was actually through, I only knew one entrepreneur at the time, and it was a white dude, Bo. Lovely guy, but in finance and very different industries altogether. But he was the only person I knew who had a business, and I was intimidated. He said, "No, no, no." We literally were like getting a drink, and he pulled out the napkin, and it wasn't just the proverbial napkin, but we started charting out what a business plan would look like. And I realized, oh yeah, it's not rocket science, and I know fashion. I may not have a background in it officially, but I know clothes and I can figure this out. And that was another seed, another aha moment planted in me. And then I went to my alma mater. I went to University of North Carolina at
Mm-hmm.
Chapel Hill, and they were just starting, very nascent kind of ecosystem for entrepreneurship. And so again, there wasn't a fashion program, wasn't a lot of focus on design, but I got a lot of support from the business school and some of my professors, and even new ones. One very generous uh, advertising professor who also owned a boutique near campus she transformed her entire store into, sorry, her home into a boutique and brought her friends. And this was my first opportunity selling my line. And it just was so validating and so beautiful, this community of women supporting other women and really like, like I could see how excited they were in their eyes and their feedback about how fashion could actually be a source of good and a source of connection to women thousands of miles away. Um, and so that was wonderful.
I love that. How in your telling that story, there's the community that was immediate. I mean, even with the humbling challenge of having to face your colleagues from, the week before when you were serving them in the Starbucks, and having to reach out and get the support of your family to start over again.
Yes. Yes. And they were very supportive of me. I don't think that they fully understood what it is that I wanted to do, but they they believed in me nonetheless. So I definitely give credit to my family, to the university, to
Mhm.
friends. So yeah, that definitely hugely pivotal. And then my interns, I also recruited from the university and some of my first hires. And then I saw some of those students start their own fashion lines too, which is just like the chef's kiss, right? When you see
Yeah.
other mentees doing their own things and carrying that torch.
Marissa, you said
Well,
something that was really key for me that I'd like to back up for a minute and kind of expand on a little bit. You said your family didn't really understand, but they supported. And, I just want to say that it doesn't matter who it is in your life, whether it's your friends, your family, a spouse, it doesn't matter who it is. That's the way it should be. They don't need to understand in order to support. Support is what we do for people we care about. And family, community is an extension of family. And so, we're always trying to drive home that if you're not in a community where people believe in you, celebrate you, and support you, then you're in the wrong community, even if it's family.
Yeah,
100%.
100%. Yes. And being intentional and the chosen family that you can bring around and manifest and I'm seeing that show up in some of my friendships uh as well. I think that we all have different journeys and chapters in our lives. And it just any relationship, I think this is something I'm noodling on this year in particular. It's my word of the year is friendship. And really understanding friendship as a relationship, just like that takes work and communication and boundary setting, and vulnerability, just like romantic relationship, which is what we're taught all the time, can include, take work, but family relationships. But friendship is one of those things that I think we take for granted. And I know I've done it myself, and I really want to be intentional in investing in that chosen family that I call friends.
I
But
think one of the things I've learned in that department is that the way I determine my friends is by really stepping back and looking each time I leave their presence. Do I feel drained or do I feel lifted?
Mm.
And of course, any loved one that you have, occasionally you will walk away feeling drained because they may be going through a really, really hard time in their life, and they may be sharing that with you. They may be venting, and so it's one thing to occasionally walk away feeling drained, but when we consistently walk away feeling drained, that's worth looking at to determine, is this really a valid relationship in my life, no matter who it is, whether it's a family member, a parent, a sibling, a coworker. There's a lot of conversation about cancel culture, and I'm not one who really believes in canceling, but I do very much believe in surrounding myself with people that lift me up, and the people that don't lift me up, letting go of them. We get to curate our own community,
Mhm.
and we get to have as many communities as we want.
True, true. And it's so empowering, that reframe, that shift in thinking. Because this is not something that I was really taught. I think the narrative is you make friends in your life, and then depending on, it's almost like depending on circumstance. You'll meet new friends, maybe if you have kids, once you're out of school, out of college. But I think that there's a lot of folks struggling, right? We have talked a little bit about this in the past too, is that we're in a loneliness epidemic in the US. It's unique to the US. And so I think that's also worth introspection too. What is it
Mhm.
that's really driving this preference for staying home and Netflixing and binging, which of course, we enjoy sometimes, and that can be a source of recharge. But I don't know, I'm an extrovert, and I get real sad if I sit at home too much by myself, and I really need that energy and fit like in-person energy, being around others, and of course those that do fill my cup. I think that's a great point that you bring, because you're listening to your intuition, right? And feeling that energy. It's a bodily response that you'll have from your body knows if you're around people who are supportive and good and nourishing, or maybe detracting. So that's because sometimes I'm like, I want to figure out what's the line. And I don't want to give up on a friendship that maybe I've had for a long time and I've held sacred. Um, but trying to understand and trust my gut, my intuition is one of the things that I'm really trying to hone in on.
I've also come to believe that friendship lives on a two-way street if it's real friendship.
Mm,
I have lived on streets in varying friendships where it was a one-way street, and I now know that that's not true friendship.
mhm, mhm. Indeed.
it's pretty heavy. Um, a while ago, you kind of touched on something that I think might be a lighter topic. You mentioned about how you had certain creative inclinations even as a little girl. So tell us a little bit more about little Marissa.
Well, I had recently come across a scrapbook that I had made when I was little, and I was like, when I grow up, I want to be dot dot. And I had put a writer, which is, why my parents had encouraged me to study journalism. And I love storytelling, and that is a through line or thread that weaves together all of these different ventures that I'm on because story is so important and powerful. But I put writer, fashion designer, and primatologist. So I love, man, I could talk about bonobos all day long. They're fascinating. Genetically closer to humans than chimpanzees. But I had read Jane Goodall's In the Shadow of Man, I think in sixth grade, and it was just like, whoa, I was like, I want to be her. Then I realized, there's a lot of I don't know, uncomfortable like dealings with large bugs and snakes and things that are involved in that. And I was like, I don't know if my little prissy self would be the best for that. But I do love a good like gorilla video. I love learning about bonobos. There's a great book called The Bonobo Handshake. Like I said, there it's a little raunchy what the bonobo handshake refers to, but it's a matrilineal group that focuses on having sex instead of having war going into fighting, which is fascinating. So anyway, that was my little self was kind of thinking about these different directions, but I was glued to the TV whenever there was a fashion show on. I'll tell you, I still love Project Runway. This is also adult Marissa. But that show lifted that veil of obscurity for me big time in fashion because I did not know. It felt a million miles away. But then I saw these designers draping fabric on a garment. And then I took some classes. I actually audited a class that for $50. I don't think that I think it was like a loophole I found in the system, but just for, a small amount of money, I was able to take some pattern making classes at a university nearby. And then I went to India. I spent a lot of time in India and made friends. There, I made some friends who were designers. This was a year before I decided to launch my label. And I met them at Fashion Week there, and I was like, ended up dating one of them. But one of them, yeah, Tushar is a really great designer, and he just let me kind of sit in his studio and like be a little sponge. And I absorbed so much. And again, that's like international community too, right?
Yeah.
I think that, I think overall people really want to help other people. And there's this a feeling of hospitality that I've experienced time and time again in India and on other travels too that makes me appreciate because I think I don't know, I think at times here we get protective and we assume that strangers, stranger danger, maybe aren't out for our best interest. But I think overall that people we're so much more alike than we are different, and people want to open their hearts and homes at times too to others. And I think there's some great lessons from my travels in that.
Well, and speaking of lessons, it sounds like you're dropping some hard-earned wisdom. But what are some other lessons that you've learned on your journey?
I think so. I talked about Symbology. I launched in 2012, so it's been a minute. Um, and then I launched a company called Edico, which is a women-owned sustainable cooperative, like a boutique in Fort Worth on Magnolia Avenue. And we had 16 women-owned brands, majority BIPOC owned. About half were working with artisans in abroad in a fair trade context. So we had beautiful bags and belts from Peru. We had jewelry from Kenya. We had my line from India, my clothing line. Um, and then some really great locally made skincare and candles that were made using sustainable materials. And, but I opened right before, a couple months before the pandemic. October 2019, late October, so basically November, and it was rough. Having this was my first go at a brick and mortar store. And what I will say again, community, that Fort Worth community in near South Side or Fairmount district was so supportive through all of the bullshit and the heartache and the scary times that were 2020. And I remember feeling, I mean, we had to shut our doors in March like everybody else, but I felt obligated to these women who had put their money and trust into me to have this store because this was all of us, although my name was on the rent. So it was like,
Mhm.
okay. So I built an e-commerce site to kind of drive traffic while we weren't open, but I opened on Mother's Day and we had a table outside and we had folks who were able to shop outside and those who were coming in wear the mask. We started selling masks that went, sold like crazy. And I think that, I mean, just that community loved and supported us and nurtured us more than I think, than we would have had we not had that story of supporting other women and that connection of the community because these were all local women who were local to DFW. And people seek that. They want meaning behind the products that they're buying. So that was really beautiful. And then I think, oh man, I was started going like going through a divorce around that time, and my mom got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at 66. So I got started. It was rough. It was COVID, and sales were not where they needed to be, and so I had to shut the store down. And I really leaned on a women's group in Fort Worth that I was a part of. And it was called the Queen's Circle. My friend Sarah Sutherland still runs these groups of women who are really coming together in intentionality and from a place of discovering our divine feminine um, and leaning into that and then into that intuition. And it's from that a lot of deep soul work, but also in community with other women who were going through, just different stages of their life, but we were all connected in this search of being vulnerable together and digging deep into what it is that our passion is and our strengths and really our inner calling was. And then from that place of alignment, I came up with the inclusive wellness design venture. So I still run that part-time while I'm working at SMU, and it is called it's all about creating spaces that promote belonging and flourishing and connection and creativity and innovation. And I think these things are all interconnected and really envisioning, like what does work look like in this new era where we're in a hybrid. Now we're kind of people are getting forced to go back in. But I mean, can we rethink work as a space of this beautiful regenerative community that we are talking about? And I do think it can happen. Um, and so I'm excited to see some of that, but it can also feel really dark right now too. But it's only through that community and collaboration. Like I think really just coming from a place um, of of curiosity and abundance. I think there's a very two clearly distinctive mindsets. And there's a great video that talks about living above the line or below the line.
Mhm.
that one of my mentors shared with me. And I think it's so telling. You can find it on YouTube. But when you live below the line, which a lot of us do, and a lot of our the way society functions, we're kind of taught that there's a finite pie. You know, the world is a scary place. People are out to get you. You've got to fight for yourself. Everything is a competition. And then that leads us to a place of immediate kind of judgment of others and a very small way of living. Whereas if we can live above the line, that's a place of curiosity and play and abundance and the space where kind of there's things are not mutually exclusive. We all can win and benefit together. And I think I've been really fortunate in the businesses I've created and some of the communities I've joined to have been able to really experience what that life of abundance feels like and looks like in a really tangible way. And it's incredible and it's beautiful. And what you do and Maddox, you all create these beautiful bubbles as well. And I'm passionate about extending some of this beautiful learning and connection beyond these smaller circles and bridging the gap. And my goal is if we can get corporate America to be more on board, we spend 2/3 of our lives at work. That's a lot of our life. And if we can reshape what can feel like such a, I don't know, think about Office Space, that movie, right? Like incredibly just humdrum, soulless experience into something that we look forward to and we love. And either we join something like that or we create it because it doesn't exist in bountiful amounts right now, it feels like. So do we just disengage and do we create something on our own with others that isn't dependent on the system that tends to reward extraction, exploitation, and kind of individualism that it was like one person who did all the things, right? So, kind of noodling on these themes at the moment.
There's two
Oh,
things that stick out for me as I listen to you. One is with everything you're sharing about your values, your philosophy, it is very much in alignment with our values and philosophy, amazingly so. We've had conversations prior to this, but this one is much more zeroed in on it and much more clear that how much we have in common. The other thing that stands out for me in your stories is that you, my dear, are a master at pivoting
That's sweet. Yeah. Um,
and resilience, because pivoting is a part
yeah.
pivot is part of resilience. You've been able to shift gears when the proverbial shit hit the fan and figure out a
mhm.
way to make it work.
It's funny you say that. I think it's felt at times, especially in this latest venture, because I don't have a background in interior design. And that's what technically the industry I'm kind of in. I feel like I'm throwing pasta at a wall and seeing what sticks. Now it's all good pasta. Like I believe in everything, but especially the way that I'm framing things, I have to figure out, especially if I'm going for corporate leaders, what's the language? What's the thing that's going to pull them in to be part of our journey? Because I can't lead necessarily, especially these days around DEIB, which is always going to be important for me. Um, I can't necessarily lead even with like joy and play, which one would think this is something that we would want to have at work. But we've again been so conditioned. So I think that there's something, and I just brought this up recently. It feels like a muscle that I've built. And it's not anything really special about me in any way. It's just literally I didn't start a business, but I started a magazine, an international human rights magazine when I was at the university in North Carolina. I hadn't taken classes in magazine journalism, so I didn't totally know all of the correct things to do, but we didn't have one. And I said, there's super important things that we're learning in class. Let's make these, let's create an engaging magazine. Anyway, the process of going through and starting a magazine and finding funding and finding resources is so similar to me starting a clothing line, which was the same thing as me starting us opening a store and then starting another business. So it's also, yes, listening to the customer. I think that's super important as creatives, because I've seen this come up in my mentorship with other designers and artists who are in my boutique space, is that, we have a vision and we have something that is really beautiful that we want to bring to the world. And then, of course, as we're trying to market it, you want to get into this very specific, what is your signature? What is your unique value add? And that's all good kind of from a business and marketability sense. But at the same time, if we get a little too focused on what we bring to the world as artists, and particularly I'm thinking about designers, interior fashion, it's all, you have to make sure that you're creating something your customer wants. So I think listening, that active listening, that's where a lot of my pivoting has come, because I'll see, okay, let me put this out there. Let me get your feedback. And then and that's part of design thinking, which is another thing I could nerd out about. I think it's such a great way of thinking about creativity and innovation in a way that kind of ensures success, but also ensures that the end customer really gets a product or a service that's really going to be tailored to their needs. Because it involves a lot of this empathy, interviews, understanding of those people. So I think just in being a creative person, yes, I have my own ideas of what I would love to see, but I need to make sure that my customers really want that and it's going to resonate with them, because I need that to sustain my business. So I think that the pivoting piece, it's like a little bit of a, yeah, I suppose that getting a little bit detached from my designs as being necessarily my design has been really helpful. And I'm designing for others within, like, my signature style. But I think about Elizabeth Gilbert writing about the creative process. And I can't remember the name of this, but she talked about this little figurative creature. And I think Roman and Greek times, there's this idea that this little creature comes and visits you when you're in this process and like imbues this creativity and then leaves. And then so it's not really even necessarily my work. It's this work of this little figure, this little creative little nugget, little guy who comes through. And I think that that detachment can be really healthy for creatives as we're like trying to navigate, um, you know, being entrepreneurs. Like, we're selling our art, we're selling our designs.
I hadn't thought of it like that from a detachment point, but so I'm grateful for what you just said. I really do believe that our creativity is not of us. It doesn't come from me, it comes through me.
Yeah.
And I think that I can see the detachment in that as I say it, but had never been able to connect the dots until just this moment when you said it. That if you can realize that the creativity is coming through you and not from you, you can detach from it and diminish the control that ego tries to exert sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I think we've covered quite a bit of ground, and in telling your story, even though we've just done the highlights, I think that there's a lot that up and coming creative entrepreneurs can probably pick up from what you've shared. But if you could whisper into the ear of someone that wanted to make that first bold leap into that realm, what advice would you share with them?
Mhm. Okay, I've got two. 'Cause I'm mentoring some students right now too who are in the exact same situation. I think develop we call it in business an MVP, minimum viable product. That just
Mhm.
means a piece of art or something that you want to sell, but put it out there in the world. It does not need to be perfect. And especially, I will say, speaking to my fellow women in the audience, we are socialized to be small and to be perfect and to not speak up, right? And so this all manifests in the ventures that we pursue. And even if it's not a conscious thing, a lot of times we second guess ourselves and we think things have to be perfect to put it out there in the world, and that if it doesn't immediately resonate or something doesn't work, that's a reflection on ourselves, right? But that's why, again, it's important to be detached, because this is not who you are. Your art is an expression, but it does not have to define you. And I mean, very few people, if we listen to the stories of entrepreneurs time and time again, How I Made This, that great podcast, right? It is grit, it is perseverance, it is persistence. So put it out there. Whatever it is that you want to do, go ahead and start getting feedback. Like, you're going to have to rework that. You're going to have to do some pivots, and you'll have little, what I say, little failures. You could say that way, or little pivots, opportunities to pivot. And that will make your product and what you're offering all the better, because we're providing a service for folks. So I think that's really important. And my second piece of advice would be to reach out and ask for help, ask for support from your network. And if you don't know people, well, now you know Dwight and Maddox. And come reach out to me. Like, the people who want to help, I think most people do. I'll go back to that with my reflections on traveling around the world, is that I think overall people want to help others succeed. And I don't think that we are all coming from this place of, competition. What I will say is that it's important for you to be able, once you start getting all this advice and help and connections, because people will help connect you to other folks who can change your life, understanding and discerning what is good advice from maybe what isn't going to serve you is a challenge. But at least you're getting those ideas from other people. And a lot of my success is from luck and yes, grit, sure, perseverance, because I'm so passionate about the work that I'm doing. But also a lot on the people who I reached out to and my network. And I will say I moved to Dallas and Fort Worth. Almost been 10 years, but I didn't know anyone, and I wasn't particularly excited. I didn't really know much about Texas other than some of the more negative stereotypes. Um, and so it took me a while to find my people. And now I feel like, oh, I'm so plugged in and it's beautiful. And they're all over the Metroplex. And I think yeah, it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation a little bit about friendship and adulthood. And that can be a daunting thing. I don't have children, for instance, and so I don't meet other parents of youngins at school or PTA. And so I have to be really intentional. And as an artist and entrepreneur, I also really have to get out of my own little I'm not the biggest hermit though. There's some real I mean, a lot of talented artists are more introverted, and they're working and creating these beautiful things at home. But I think it's so important, no matter how busy we are, that we take a beat and connect with other folks, because being an entrepreneur, being an artist can be really lonely. And having that connection, even if somebody isn't an artist, doesn't exactly know or have the same experience that you do, in that venture, just going it alone, but knowing you're not alone, and you can bitch together, you can support each other and find collaborations. Like there's so much that has come from me just seeking out some of that community. And then it like compounds. I keep manifesting and like meeting cool people like you, right? And it's just I feel like it's a magnet. Right now I'm attracting these really authentic, beautiful humans. And it's helping me to survive in what feels like a very scary time for many of us. And the work that I want to do, I just want to, I don't know, get out of this country. I don't know what there's moments where I've just wanted to flee to protect myself. Um, and I think it's these communities that keep us grounded and in a place of flourishing and beauty and joy and collective joy.
Yes, you've touched on something. I think I have developed several mantras lately, and this is one of my newest ones, and that is in isolation, you can survive. In community, you can thrive.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and this theme has come up quite a bit. I'm researching and learning more about indigenous wisdom from different communities, and in braiding sweetgrass, the author, I think her name's Robin Kilmer. She has a hyphenated last name, but she talks about this idea of mutual flourishing being paramount in her indigenous upbringing and that all flourishing is mutual. And I love this idea because we see it all over nature. That there's this idea of massed fruiting of trees, that trees communicate with each other. We see it with mushrooms and these other parts of our ecosystem that help support each other in times of scarcity, and in times of abundance. We spread the wealth. So I love this idea that we know it. We've just we've moved so far away from it with our capitalist system. I will say this also being on the board of Conscious Capitalism in Dallas, it's trying to create more human and environmentally focused businesses is a challenge because it's counter to a lot of our industrialist, our individualist and industrial roots in this country. And
Yeah.
I think it's something we've got to rethink for our survival and position as Americans. In
I agree fully.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
there's a lot of unrest and people are unhappy and it's still this we still have the power in ourselves to create something different, even if we don't have a lot of examples of that. And it's only through the community that I've had the courage to really think about stepping away from the matrix and charting my own path.
yes.
And it's beautiful. It's a little scary, but that is also life, right? We don't know what's going to happen, but at least I feel like I'm trying to live life to the fullest, even if it's scary, even if I get hurt along the way.
It's about expanding our comfort zone.
And it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So our time is drawing close to an end, but we'd like to close with something that we call rapid fire questions. Are you ready to do some rapid fire
Oh
answers?
gosh, I will try.
All right. So, first question: who is your creative role model?
Oh, okay. I love this one designer. Well, actually, she's popular now. Elsa Schiaparelli.
Okay.
He was friends with Salvador Dali back in the day in like the 20s. And she has a fabulous couture line now, but she was kind of not in the common vernacular, but she created the lobster dress and the shoe hat that I have tried to recreate for Halloween. And it's incredibly hard, but it's an upside down shoe, like a stiletto that doubles as a hat. And it is amazing. And she has a skeleton dress that like literally like the skeleton is coming out of the back of the dress. So she's like surrealist, just badass.
Cool. Next rapid fire question. What dream project would you like to tackle?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a great question. Okay. Well, I've been working on some of these wellness spaces in corporate areas and innovation rooms that like really lean into play and role play and like things like Dungeons and Dragons and Harry Potter. So that's really fun as a way to spark creativity and collaboration. I I don't know. I feel like if I could design something like this like expansive play innovation center for I don't know, like a Google or a cool company here, that would be really amazing. I've just done a lot of research. I didn't dive into it too much in this conversation, but around what makes our brains healthy and promotes neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. And so much of play and movement and connection, social connection, is so key to that. So I just think from a health perspective and like doing our best work, but like leaning into the play and giving permission to for adults to have fun, and being like part of that design would be so cool.
Cool. Next question. What's one lesson you've learned from your creative community?
Ah, um, keep going. When it doesn't look like there is a way to success, just keep keep persevering, pivot if you need to, but don't give up.
Love it. Finally, is there anything that you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered in our conversation?
Mm. This is a great question. I know we're not going to talk about dates too much, but there is a conference that I'm helping to coordinate that empowers creatives to view themselves as entrepreneurs and really change the poor artist, quote unquote, dynamic, and flip it on its head. It's called Art Boost, and it's every summer in June at SMU, and it's a great series of workshops. I think tapping into creative mornings as well. I love that community. That's where we connected. Um, I think just staying in contact with your community and leading on those friendships, and being vulnerable too is really, it opens up a lot of doors. We all as
Yes.
humans seek authenticity. We want to know, like we want to get to know each other more deeply. I am just not here for the bullshit small talk. It just does not, that drains me like none other. And
Amen, sister.
I don't want to do it. No.
Hey, you've made several references to SMU, and I just want to say for those people that might be far away and not have any idea what SMU is, it is Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yes, and if you are affiliated, if you've graduated from SMU or you're a student and interested in starting a venture, that we do have a focus on arts entrepreneurship as well with the lab. So just can reach out, and I'm sure we'll have some links and things like that.
Yes,
But
we will.
um, yeah, let's keep in touch.
Marissa, this has
Well,
been amazing.
yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you for joining us today. This has been fabulous.
I appreciate it.